All right, welcome to the Keychain project. With the Keychain project, I have a number of items out that you will need to be fully prepared in order to start the project. And the first thing is I'll be giving you two keychain kits. Inside, you'll find two copper tubes. And these tubes are going to need some prep work in order to be glued into our wooden blocks that are be making our keychain. The next thing we're going to need, of course, is a scratch awl and ruler for finding the center and the ends of the blocks. Also, we have a number of other items here. I always like to have a little paste wax. It's going to help with assembling. We also use the CA glue, and there's three different thicknesses. There's the thin, which is quite liquidy. There's the medium, which I tend to use, and then there's the thick. The medium takes a little bit more time for things to cure up, but you don't have a lot of liquid around on the bench. So the CA glue. We also are going to need blocks. These are 2 1/8 inches in length. You're going to need 2 of them. And today I've selected cherry as the species that will be turning today. Nice domestic wood, and it usually has, and when it's done, it has a beautiful color and accents. So there's the cherry. We also need a drill bit. This is a 7mm project, meaning we have a 7mm man drill. Man drill is dozens of different projects that can be made using this device and this technique. And this is a 7mm, which requires a 7mm drill bit. And this is a Colt, German made, and it does some very nice work. And this is a bit that we use and that I recommend. And however, there are others out there. We're also going to need, since we got 2, is these are called insertion tools. And normally put a coat of wax on here because the CA glue would be very close to this, and we don't want to adhere our keychain part to the insertion tool. And then we're also going to need these barrel trimmers, and I have 2 here, very similar, slightly different styles, but they do the same work. So barrel trimmer, and also a pair of channel locks, much like pliers, but with the angle here. I also like to have a putty knife that has a sharp edge. Sandpaper, 220 grit is the minimum grit. I prefer 320 or 280, something a little bit finer if possible. All right, I'll explain that in a little bit. And then also a scrap piece of wood is nice to have to rest our work on while the glue is curing. So, and then lastly, what's here is this nice vise. This vise provides us an opportunity to clamp our keychain blocks in like so and tighten it down, and it's something that's definitely necessary. Hand screw clamp could be used instead, and there are some other clamping techniques that can be used. All right, so next we're going to do is we're going to get started with cutting our keychain blanks. All right, the next step here is to cut our keychain blanks. Here's the cherry. This measures just about 15/16 by 15/16. That means the width compared to the thickness. And what I need to do is that one of the few times where we use the grip fence and miter gauge together. And miter gauge has been squared with the saw blade right there, so we're in good shape. And I'm going to bring this back closer. All right. So this has been squared with no daylight, so I'm okay there. Next thing is the keychain wooden blank needs to be 2 1/8 inches. And you cannot use the rip fence and the blade like so by putting the wood directly up to the fence as our measuring device. We need some space. And what we use is a stop block, which you've seen on the tests and the videos that we've seen. So installing that on the grip fence, taking my ruler, holding up in the air, and I'm looking for a tooth on the combination square that points towards the fence. So I'm holding my ruler up like so, I'm bringing it forward, right, adjusting the fence so that that tooth lies right on the 2 1/8 inch measurement. Right there, clamping it down gently. I've got my 2 1/8. From the tooth that points towards the fence, I'm good to go. Next thing, slide the stop block back. I'm going to have a nice clean squared end. I'm going to square it again. Now with the cherry, you need to hold it down with your right hand. You're going to squeeze against the miter gauge with your left. We're going to cut, slide it to the left, bring it back so we're not dragging the wood back across the blade, over, and we're going to start cutting 2 pieces. So, are we ready? We are ready. Okay, turn it on, and I'm going to square the end. Hold my stopwatch, first block. So it's real tempting. I've seen students want to reach in here when the blade's winding down and pick up the material. Do not do that. Wait till the blade stops. Now, the order that this came off of the saw was like this. If we're making a pen and pencil kit, we would want to index, meaning I'm just going to put a 1 and a 1 in regards to those 2 faces of this block, so that when I drill them and I assemble the blocks onto the mandrel, they're going to be right next to each other, so you have continuous grain when it's all done and you reassemble the blocks. All right, so my next step is I have my 2 blocks. I have them indexed. That's if I was making a pen and pencil kit. I'm just going to put them up on edge like this. Since my blocks are quite square, or if they're rectangular, we'd be able to go corner to corner. I'm measuring right here, and it's measured side. Actually, it's just on the big side of 15/16. But I'm going to take my ruler and go corner to corner, and that's going to give us a fairly accurate center. So, a little scribe line in the center. Again, another line in the center. You don't have to go all the way across. Just keep it clean, keep it simple. I'm going now to the second one and marking it as well. So, corner to corner. Little line in the center of the block. I like that. Next, I'm going to take my scratch awl. Once again, put your thumb down, rest it on top, line it up perfectly. You go vertical and a light blow. That's all you need. There's one, and now here is the second one. Vertical, 2 on that one, and now we have our indentation marks for drilling. Nice. Now that we have our blocks marked, it's time to use the floor standing drill press to drill the holes through our blocks. That's going to be the 7mm. Since we're not drilling through the entire, well, we are drilling through the entire block, but since we're going to be holding it in vise, I like working right off the top of the cast iron table. And the table needs to be nice, clean, no debris on here. I'm taking our clamping vise, like so. It has 2 notches in it, so the block of wood can fit diagonally through the vise, and it's held really nicely. So I'm opening it up. It has a little shelf on the bottom, it drops down. Now I'm going to clamp it. Next stage is using the 7mm Colt drill bit, opening up the chuck, inserting it to the flutes, dropping it down a tad, tightening up the collar, and then pressing on the thumb, keychain, 1 location, 2 locations. Happy with that. You can see that the bit is below our material, so we need to loosen up the clamp. That was the table clamp. We're going to lower the table until the drill bit is just above our material. Next, turn the chuck, looks good. We're going to turn it on. It seems to be rotating just fine. I'm going to move the piece and align it with the drill bit on. Hold it. The drill bit goes down, finds that indentation, and now we're going to drill through in a series of short steps. Drill, pause, drill, pause, drill, pause, drill, pause, drill, pause, and then drill, pause. There it goes. Slow down before breaking through the bottom side. Next, take that out, go to block number 2, insert it, clamp it, and drill. Pause. Okay, two done. Now we're going to go back to the table and install the copper tubes into our blanks. Okay, so the next step is that we have the copper tubes. Like with any copper, like the Statue of Liberty, it turns green due to the salt air in regards to the ocean. Here, copper, it also oxidizes and it gets some contaminations on here and nothing bonds well to it. If you're soldering pipe at home for plumbing, you have to clean the material in order for a good sweat of pipe so that the solder fully goes around the joint. Same thing here, we're using CA glue, we need to deoxidize the copper tubes. And an old timer showed me this and it just made so much sense. And so I have my sandpaper here, I'm using 320, and I have two small pieces, and you simply place the copper tube in the sandpaper with one hand, and then there's another piece in the other, and you just go back and forth. Once we have deoxidized the copper tube, you cannot touch it with your fingers. You should not put it down on the tabletop. It needs to be suspended so that nothing makes contact with it to contaminate. So, a few passes like this. In the past, I've had some students use 120 sandpaper, but that's so aggressive that it can actually decrease the OD, the outside diameter of the copper tube, and then it fits really loosely inside the keychain blank. So now I'm still holding on to the sandpaper, I'm placing it on the insertion tool, taking the second one, and doing the same thing. Now I also like to put a little of this paste wax on the metal of the insertion tool, which helps as a buffer if any CA glue ventures onto the tool. It's less likely to bond, or it takes much more time so that we can deal with that. So, deoxidizing, good. I think that looks pretty good. Install on the second insertion tool. There we go. Nice. See how I have suspended on the scrap block. Next, I have my tubes, and we have the CA glue. Again, this is medium, and make sure the tip is not clogged, which I can feel some air passing through. And here, what I do is, since it's medium viscosity, I am going to put a few drops down one side, putting it at an angle, and this is rolling down the inside of the drilled out tool piece. And now I'm going to put some on the opposite side. So now I have two rolling sections of the CA glue rolling down. And I don't want it to drip out on the other side, but that's why I have the white paper here, so the glue doesn't go on the workbench and damaging that for students' work. So I'm looking at the other end, it's almost coming out of the other end. I can see it traveling down through. I'm going to flip it around, and next I'm going to put a couple of drops on this end and angle it for it to travel down through. What's key with any of this assembly with the copper tubes into any blank is that if you have any glue voids, meaning locations that do not have a coat of glue on, when you're machining this on the lathe, those voids are like pockets of air, and the wood flexes, and it can cause the block of wood to fracture, and then you have pieces. So, almost coming out of the end, I'm going to put this one down like so. Next, take my copper tube, and this is where I use a little more glue than the average person, as I cover the copper tube, and then I use the side of the end to spread it around the rest of the area. With doing this, I've just extended the time before I can work on it again for about 25 minutes. So this is going to need more time to cure. So, I have a thin layer of glue on there. Here's the one that I covered. And now when I insert this, I'm actually going to rotate it, spin it around like this. And so hopefully the entire surface inside and a 7mm hole is getting covered with glue. I go 7/8 of the way, I flip it around, and then I go this end. I'm going to leave it there, take my putty knife, hold it, and it worked out well with not having the copper tube bond to the insertion tool. So, setting this down, I'm going to leave it like this for about 30 seconds, and I'm going to flip it 180 degrees. So, time for the second one. Same thing. A couple drops down one side, a couple drops down the other. You're going to be traveling down the inside. All right, they're a little more than halfway down. I'm going to flip it around and do this side. That looks good. We'll let it travel. You've got to be careful because it's going to exit on the other end if you're not careful. Put it like so. Now it's time for the copper tube. So this step right here needs to be done the day before you want to start turning. So if you finish a project and there's 15 minutes left in class, that is the perfect time to prep your blanks, have the copper tubes glued in, and then the next time you arrive to class, everything's going to be cured, everything's going to be ready, and we can then start the machining process. So, go like this, spin, 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 nice, 7/8 of the way, remove, and then insert it, get your putty knife handy, and remove it, and make sure the copper tube is flush. You can see it's put a little more on this one. So I'm going to flip this one 180 degrees, so the glue now will weak down through with gravity around the other end. That one's going to stay like this. If we had a cloth, we could wipe up the excess and so forth. Okay, the next step is drilling using the barrel trimmer, cleaning up the ends, and then attaching to our mandrel. All right, with the magic of video, I have two blanks here that are ready to go. First thing is to remove 7mm hole drill bit. Remove that, and when we take it out, we put it back in the sleeve. Next, I'm going to install the barrel trimmer. It goes into the chuck, gets secured, spin it to make sure it doesn't wobble, tighten it down in two locations, 1 and 2. Move the chuck key. Next, I take my glued up block, place it back into the vise, clamp it nicely, hold it from the side, and the center section is going to go right down through the center of the copper tube, like this. So right now it's clearing out the glue, and the excess glue inside the tube. And now bring it down, and that looks good. Turn it off. How far do we drill? We drill till we see the copper pipe, copper tube on the top. All right, that's how far we go. Once you see the shiny tube, that's it. Flip it over, and we'll do the same thing on the other end. Drill through the tube, and there's the copper tube. See it right here, and now we're set to go for assembling these blocks on the mandrel. All right, our next step here is to attach the blocks onto our mandrel, and I took the cap off, and we have these sleeves. Again, this mandrel is number 3, so this is going to be on lathe station number 3, so this will have a definite home, and that's where it's going to stay, and that's where it's going to be. So I need to remove these sleeves, and they roll around, and they're not to be lost. And I'm going to leave one on, and then I'm going to attach first block, and then I'm going to put 2 on as a spacer. These are spacers, sleeves, so that you can work on each block individually, and then I'm going to put on the last remaining 2. Now this second sleeve needs to be covering the threads. That's really critical in order for the clamping process to happen, which means putting that threaded wheel on, and then we're going to be using the channel locks here to tighten it. So the next step is to assemble this, install it on the lathe for turning of the two keychains. All right, our next step here of the keychain making process is that we have our mandrel. We have our two pieces of domestic cherry attached here. We have our spacers, and we have the cap. So this is a Morse 2 taper, so it's going to fit right into the headstock just like so. We move banjo out of the way, grabbing my dancing partner, and we're going to line it up with the end of the mandrel, make sure the clamp is loose, and now I'm snugging it up just a bit, and then tighten it down like so, getting it to spin, and it looks pretty good. Taking the tool rest along with banjo and moving it within about 1/8 of an inch of our part, just like that. Okay, so that is good. Spinning it, oh, just made contact, so I'm going to move it back just a bit. Now, the next thing is that we need to use the channel locks here. And I'm going to make contact and hold the cap screw here, the end, and what this is going to do is going to clamp the pieces in the mandrel. So I'm holding on to the end, the cap, turning it, and I can tell that it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter as I turn the headstock wheel. There it is. That's pretty good. So, the rest goes back in place, and we're going to tighten it down. Lower it down a bit. First tool we're going to be using will be the roughing gouge. With my face shield, I'm going to put this on, put it into place. And my first task here is just to round off the corners and create 2 cylinders. That's going to be my first step. Here we go. Okay, I have 2 cylinders now, and this piece of cherry has some really nice pith streaks here, and we got a little flat spot there. And now we got to think about design. And when I like to design a keychain, I like to have an end that, where the keys attach, this would be a smaller diameter, and then we go to a larger diameter. And I like that because then it's less likely for the keys to slip through your fingers and drop to the ground, which is a story for another time when I was 16 years old, driving on my first date. So anyways, we want to not lose the keys. So I'm looking at our piece here, and so this is going to be the smaller diameter, and this will be the larger diameter. So we also have 2 choices in regards to the ends. So they can either be convex or they can be concave. And so I kind of prefer starting off with a convex end on either end, and so I look at that as point A, point B, and then my design goes in between. So the next tool will be the spindle tool here, and I'm going to put the convex radius on both ends. Nice, that's done. So thinking of my design, I have the convex on both ends, and so it leaves me plenty of material to work with. Next, I'm looking at kind of the rule of thirds here a little bit. Like to have one end for my own personal designs here be a little bit of a larger diameter going down to a smaller diameter, kind of like the bell on a trumpet or a trombone is what I tend to do. And so I'm going to start off with this more on the right. And at this time too, I'm also going to check to see, let me see if that's loosened up. I'm assuming that's pretty good. And now we're going to begin. So the next step here, as you can see, it's almost like a mini bird vase going on. Now, something we need to be very cautious of is that we have these spacers. These spacers are essentially nearly the same diameter as our copper tube at the inside. So if any part of this keychain project becomes the diameter of these spacers, guess what, folks? You're probably just cutting into your copper tube and you've created a piece of scrap wood, and the project is now scrap. So right now I'm using my calipers and setting it up for the spacers, and then we want to increase that diameter by a turn or two, or we could actually measure it, right? Use the measuring and pick up the ruler, and we're looking at a solid 1/2 inch. So I would recommend not having any part of the diameter of your project smaller than a 1/2 inch. And you can check that as you go along. So I'm going to start cleaning this one up. I'm also looking to have a little sharper transition between the diameter, have a little accent, have a little style, a little profile. There's that one. Next I have my custom made Allen wrench small spindle gouge. And here is an opportunity to put in a couple little accents. So I'm going to do that now. All right, here's my first keychain. I would follow the same process for the second one. Good. Okay, there we are, 2 keychains. Next step would be sanding, which would be to remove the tools. Pick up a piece of 220 sandpaper. I'm going to tear it into a smaller piece, fold it like so, and work from underneath. And with sandpaper, I'd be working through the 220 sandpaper, 320, 400, and also you cannot escape, but what we're looking for is to also sand in this direction after the 120 with a grain, because we're spindle turning, so the grain direction is left to right, and when we're sanding, it's going perpendicular to that, and it's going to leave very fine, round scratch marks in here from the 220, 320, and 400. So spin it with 220, or start out with 120, spin it, and then sand with the grain, remove those round scratch marks, and then you'd pick up 220, sand it, and then go with the grain, 320, and then 400 in the same steps. After that, we're putting on 1 coat of finish. Okay, I just got through sanding the 320, and now I just finished up the 400. And again, with the 400 and with the grits between 200 and 400, we want to go with the grain after spinning it, with the grain after spinning it, and it's going to look pretty nice. Next, I take a cloth and definitely remove any sawdust that may be on here. And now I call it the magical moment. We have the oil finish. I'm going to put some on the cloth, and then on the bottom here, I'm going to turn the keychain and apply the first coat of finish. There we are. And I apply several applications until I see that the oil is not being absorbed into the wood any longer. And that means it's going to have this wet, glossy look for approximately a minute or so. And then by making contact with your finger just lightly, you're going to start feeling it become a little gummy. And with it becoming gummy means that it's starting to cure. And at that point, we would buff it off on the lathe here. So I'm applying it like this. Then after it becomes gummy, then I'm going to turn it on, apply from underneath, and remove the excess. Project cures overnight, and we do a total of 3 coats and a coat of wax at the end. 1 application per day. Excellent. Thanks.